Hello, how are you all? I thought a lot before coming here to share this story, and before anything else, I want to say that the names of the characters are fictitious. The day outside goes on like any other, but inside me there is a whirlwind. Every word I write carries weight, as if I must carefully choose what to say. The air is still, and the silence around me only makes my mind work even faster. Back in high school, my family and I lived in the countryside, in a small village where the houses were far apart. Life was simple, with no television or internet, but there was a lot of love from my parents. Mornings started early, with the smell of fresh coffee spreading through the rooms and the distant crowing of roosters echoing. Dirt roads cut through the village, and the afternoons were marked by the hot sun and the sound of the wind rustling the trees. Despite the simplicity, there was warmth in every detail, a home where affection always spoke louder. At that time, I had to take a bus to the nearest town to study. There was a school bus just for that, and from the first day, that driver caught my attention. He must have been around 40 years old, clean-shaven, with gray hair that perfectly matched his mature face. I had never been with a man before, but something about him awakened something different in me. His calm way of driving, his firm hands on the wheel, his serious yet welcoming gaze, all of it made my mind wander. I found myself imagining what it would be like to be closer to him, feeling a new curiosity, a desire I didn't yet fully understand. Months went by, and at some point, I discovered that he was my father's childhood friend. That should have changed something, but it didn't. My fascination with him remained the same, perhaps even stronger. I knew he liked women. He was married, had children, a life completely different from the one I imagined for myself. But even so, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every time I saw him, I felt that nervous excitement, that silent restlessness that made me look away and yet want to observe every detail of him. It was a forbidden, impossible desire, but one that insisted on growing inside me. There was going to be a mass in my region, and I was going to receive my confirmation. I hadn't yet chosen a godfather, but as soon as I thought about it, his name was the first that came to mind. The idea of having him there in some way closer to me made me both anxious and determined. The day I gathered the courage to invite him, my heart was pounding and I feared his reaction. But to my surprise, he was very happy with the invitation and immediately accepted with a genuine smile. His gaze carried a mix of pride and affection, and that warmed my heart. I knew it meant something very different to each of us, but at that moment, all that mattered was that he would be by my side. The day of the Mass finally arrived. The church was full, illuminated by candles and the soft sunlight streaming through the windows. The scent of incense mixed with the subtle perfumes of the people, creating that solemn and welcoming atmosphere. Everything went smoothly, and when he placed his hand on my shoulder as my godfather, I felt a mix of joy and nervousness. It was official. He was now part of my story in an even more special way. I looked at him and saw a sincere smile, a look of approval that made my heart race. I was happy. Even if he never knew about the feelings I harbored at that moment, having him there by my side already meant so much to me. Time passed, and we became closer. We saw each other every day, and this connection only strengthened our bond. Conversations became more natural, smiles more frequent, and even though nothing happened beyond friendship, his presence was something I deeply valued. But life took its course. When I finished high school, a big change came. I got accepted into a university and had to leave to study. The joy of achievement mixed with the melancholy of farewell. Leaving behind that place, my routine, my family, and especially him, was not easy. Deep down, I knew that by leaving, something between us would change forever. I stayed in the big city for 6 years, and when I returned, everything seemed different. The streets, the houses, even the people had changed over the years. Still, the feeling of being back was comforting. Seeing my relatives again after so long was special. Tight hugs, nostalgic laughter, stories about everything that happened while I was away. But as happy as I was to reunite with my family, my mind was elsewhere. I wanted to see my godfather, to know how he was, how his life had gone. Curiosity and longing mixed inside me. So without thinking too much, I decided to arrange a visit. That weekend, I would go to his house. And with that, The anticipation began to grow. The day finally arrived, and there I went, my heart racing, caught between anxiety and nostalgia. When I arrived, he was there in front of the house exactly as I remembered, handsome as ever, as if time had been kind to him. His gray hair still gave him that charming air, and his smile was the same as years ago. As soon as he saw me, he broke into a wide smile and came toward me. The hug was firm, warm, filled with familiarity. "It's so good to see you." "I'm happy with your visit," he said, his eyes gleaming. Stepping back a little, he looked me up and down and commented with a surprised tone, "You've changed so much." I smiled slightly and replied, half jokingly, "I hope for the better." He nodded without hesitation. "Of course, you look great." I returned the compliment, saying that he also looked great. That time seemed to have treated him well. He smiled, slightly shy, and invited me inside. Inside the house, between a coffee and a relaxed conversation, I ended up discovering something I didn't expect. He had separated and now lived alone. The news caught me by surprise. What once seemed impossible now took on a new shape, and without meaning to, I found myself wondering, could something between us be different this time? The hours passed, and the conversation flowed so naturally that I didn't even notice time flying. But at some point, I looked at the clock and knew I had to leave. "It's late, I better go," I said, somewhat reluctant, not really wanting to leave. He looked at me seriously for a moment and then said, "Why don't you stay over? You've been drinking, and it's dangerous to drive in this state." I hadn't drunk much, but I knew he was just making an excuse for me to stay. Maybe it was concern, maybe it was something else. Either way, I didn't refuse. "If it's not a bother?" "Not at all," he smiled. "But first, take a shower. This heat is unbearable." Pointing to a door in the hallway, he added, "The bathroom is there. I'll bring you a towel and some clothes. My clothes will fit you." I nodded, thanking him, and headed to the bathroom. The space was simple but cozy, with a faint scent of recently used soap. I turned on the shower, and the water started falling, warm and relaxing. As I felt it cascade over my body, my mind was racing. I was there, in his house, about to spend the night. What did that mean? Did he see something beyond friendship, or was it all just in my imagination? I left the bathroom door slightly open so he could drop off the towel without having to call me. The hot water ran down my body, and the steam began to fog up the mirror and walls, creating a thick atmosphere filled with something I couldn't quite name yet. A few minutes later, while I was under the shower, I heard the soft sound of the door opening. My heart leaped in my chest. I thought he would just leave the towel and walk out, but to my surprise, he stepped inside. "Is there room for one more?" His voice was low, husky, different. Nervousness took over me instantly. My heart pounded, a mix of surprise, excitement, and the feeling that something was about to change. "Of course, come in," I replied, trying to sound calmer than I actually was. He stepped in without hesitation, already completely at ease, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. But the moment I saw him up close, my body froze. What stood before me was imposing, captivating in a way that made me hold my breath for a moment. I didn't know whether to look away or to keep absorbing the scene that until recently had only existed in my imagination. Without saying another word, I moved aside under the shower, making space for him. The water began cascading over his body, and the steam around us seemed to thicken even more. The bathroom now felt smaller, tighter, and the closeness between us was inevitable. I tried to stay composed, to act naturally, but it was impossible. He was there, so close, so stunning, and the tension between us felt almost tangible. The sound of the water mixed with the silence, thick with anticipation. My body no longer responded to reason, only to the desire that grew stronger by the second. Unable to resist, I moved closer. Our eyes met for an instant, and it was as if no words were needed. Then it happened. Our lips found each other, and the moment I felt his mouth on mine, a shiver ran through my entire body. He kissed me with intensity, with a hunger that left me dizzy, lost in the moment. The touch of his lips was warm, consuming, and the faint taste of alcohol on his breath only made everything more real, more forbidden. With each second, The madness escalated, and I could no longer distinguish between right and wrong. I only knew that I didn't want to stop. After a few moments, I felt his firm hand rest on my shoulder, guiding me gently downward. My heart pounded even harder, and a different kind of heat spread through me. Without questioning, I simply followed his lead, as if my body already knew what to do. As I found myself in front of him, I tried to maintain control, to take charge of the moment, but it felt impossible. It was beyond what I had imagined, more intense, more commanding than I could handle. The sensation of being in that position, surrendering completely to that instant, filled me with a mix of nervousness and excitement. My own desire grew stronger with every second, fueled by the way he responded, by the soft sounds escaping from him. I wanted to take it all in, to dominate the situation, but the truth was, I was completely consumed by the moment, utterly out of control, and somehow, that only made it all more unforgettable. Then, Antonio pulled me up with firm hands, suddenly turning me around and pressing me against the cold bathroom wall. The temperature contrast shot through my body like an intense shiver, countering the heat that had already overtaken me. The sensation of being there, vulnerable, completely at his mercy, made my heart race even more. I felt the pressure increase, his breath warm and ragged near my neck. This wouldn't be easy. My entire body tensed for a moment, as if bracing for what was coming. But the truth was, I had already surrendered, just feeling every detail of that overwhelming moment. After a little struggle, our bodies finally found a rhythm and an unexplainable harmony. It was as if, in that moment, everything else ceased to exist. The outside world didn't matter anymore. My mind was empty of rational thought. There was only sensation, touch, the growing heat between us. Every movement made my body respond instinctively, completely given over, as if we were in perfect sync. Time seemed to slow down, and all I wanted was to savor every second, to feel each moment without rush, without fear, without any barriers between us. He held my waist firmly, his fingers pressing into my skin in a way that made it clear. He had been waiting for this for a long time. His movements were strong, intense, charged with a desire held back for years. His breath was heavy, hot against my neck, and every action confirmed the longing that perhaps had always existed between us. It was as if, in that moment, everything that had been repressed was finally coming to the surface. I felt the urgency in his touch, in the way he held me, as if he wanted to savor every second without leaving room for doubt or regret. And at that moment, nothing else mattered. I just wanted to be there, completely surrendered, feeling everything in the most intense way possible. I felt his breath change, becoming heavier, more irregular. Every move signaled that he was reaching his peak, and in that instant, a mix of excitement and frustration washed over me. I confess I didn't want it to end so soon. I wanted to stretch the moment, to feel more, to enjoy it every second as if time could stop there. But he didn't hold back much longer. With a final thrust, his body tensed, and he finally reached his climax. The intensity of it pulled me along with him, as if we were connected in a way that went beyond the physical. My own peak followed shortly after, a whirlwind of sensations that left me breathless. For a few seconds, everything was silent, only the sound of the running water filling the space. My body still vibrated, my breathing unsteady, as I tried to process everything that had just happened. That night, we explored even more, surrendered even further, but I can't tell you everything here. If you want to know all the details, uncensored, the link is in the descriptions. What I can say is that it was intense, captivating, something that exceeded any expectations I could have had. The silence of the early morning seemed to be an accomplice to what we experienced, and when we finally rested, exhaustion came with an inexplicable sense of satisfaction. I knew that night would be etched in my memory forever, not just because of what happened, but because of the way everything unfolded, natural, unexpected, and, in a way, inevitable. My name is Victor, and this was my adventure. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you next time.